Have you ever noticed? The more love, loyalty, and emotional openness you gave to a man, the less he seemed to care, as if your very effort was pushing him away. Why is it that one woman can give her full heart and be ignored, while another, less emotionally invested, becomes the center of his world? Today we'll explore a powerful psychological paradox rooted in Carl Jung's insights on ego, projection, and human attachment. You'll learn why some men respond more to distance than affection, and how to shift the dynamic not through manipulation, but through self-mastery. This situation is more than confusing. It's emotionally exhausting. Many women start doubting themselves. Was I too much, too available? But what if the problem wasn't what you gave, but how it was received? What if his disinterest had nothing to do with your worth, and everything to do with how his ego processed your attention? Once you understand this, you stop blaming yourself. You begin to approach relationships from a position of insight, not insecurity. Carl Jung defined the ego as the conscious self, the part of the psyche that identifies with one's roles, image, and sense of value. In many emotionally immature men, that ego is built on control, validation, and the need to feel superior or irreplaceable. Whilst many women naturally seek closeness and understanding, ego-driven men are often more drawn to what makes them feel admired, desired, and dominant. Here's the paradox. The moment you become too emotionally available, his ego starts to disengage, not because you're unworthy, but because you no longer present a challenge to his inflated self-image. A man's ego doesn't obsess over what it fully possesses. It obsesses over what it fears losing. When you overgive, love slowly turns into self-erasure. You center his comfort above your own boundaries, mistake crumbs for connection, and normalize inconsistency. But in doing so, you're not building intimacy. You're building dependence. And the more dependent you appear, the less emotionally valuable you become in the eyes of an ego-driven man. When you become less predictable, less accessible, the ego feels destabilized, and that destabilization creates emotional weight, which often leads to fixation. Jung believed attraction is rooted in projection. A man doesn't fall for your entire self, but for the part of you that mirrors his inner feminine ideal. When that reflection is always available, it loses its power. When it becomes rare, it becomes sacred. That's why pulling back at the right time creates emotional impact. Silence, space, and emotional restraint signal that he is no longer in control, and that is what the ego cannot tolerate. But distance alone isn't enough. You must shift from reaction to authority. He withdraws. You hold steady. He sends a vague message. You reply hours later, or not at all. He tries to provoke you. You remain composed. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. You're no longer an emotional servant offering attention he hasn't earned. You become a mirror reflecting his uncertainty instead of his dominance. The real transformation happens when you stop centering him, when you start centering yourself. Instead of asking, what is he thinking? You begin asking, who am I becoming? Carl Jung called this individuation, the journey to becoming whole within yourself. You grow mentally, physically, emotionally, socially. You stop chasing, you start radiating. And that's what strikes the male ego hardest, not your anger, not your absence, but your visible growth without him. Eventually, the man who once felt in control now feels lost. The woman who explained, forgave, and waited is gone. In her place stands a calm, powerful presence who no longer fears distance. That void becomes unbearable to his ego, not because you begged for attention, but because you stopped giving yours away. By the time he realizes what he's lost, you've already become stronger than the version of you who once waited. Because a man doesn't become obsessed with a woman proving her worth. He becomes obsessed with a woman who knows her worth and doesn't make it available to just anyone. When you stop chasing validation, you become the one thing the male ego cannot ignore. A mystery, a mirror, a magnetic presence, and that is true power.